Film, television, commercials, new media. You are listening to Producer's Pal, unmasking the business of filmmaking and sharing killer advice from seasoned pros. And now your host, Joshua Brown.
Welcome to Producer's Pal, episode number 20. I'm Joshua Brown. Today on the podcast, Jerome Courshon. This episode is sponsored by Indie Film Finance Guide. Learn more at producerspal.com/finance guide. To learn more about this episode, go to producerspal.com/Jerome Courshon. Okay, welcome to the podcast, Jerome Courshon. How are you doing today, Jerome?
I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. So if you could just describe what it is you do and tell us a little bit about your business.
Sure. I am a film producer, first and foremost, but then segued into an additional aspect of what I do, which is so important today for film producers and directors, and that is teaching about distribution for people's movies and full-length documentaries. Mm-hmm. So educating them on the ins and outs of the marketplace, how to get their films into the marketplace successfully, how to maximize revenues in each of the major markets, that being theatrical to disc, that disc being Blu-ray and DVD, to VOD, to internet VOD, to television, to foreign sales.
Very cool. And the name of your company is The Secret to Distribution, correct?
Yes, The Secrets to Distribution, and sometimes I'll refer to it as The Secrets to Film Distribution. Mm-hmm. Same difference.
Yeah.
And my website address for your listeners is very simple. It's one word. It's distribution.la. Not .com, but .la.
Very cool.
Very easy to remember.
And the reason I know you is I specifically met you at a launch party for a film festival, and I've learned that you teach on distribution. Like, you have a series on it, and you run your website and newsletter, and you've got your Facebook group. So you're very much entrenched in this side of the business.
I have become, this has become a significant part of what I do on a daily or a weekly basis. The market is, for a couple of reasons. One, nobody out there, other than me and a couple of others, really understand the marketplace and how it works for independent films. Even veteran producers haven't a clue on a lot of this stuff. And the reason is not because, they're dumb. The reason is because in the past, we never really had to know all the ins and outs of all the different markets. We made one deal with a distributor or two deals with two different distributors. We handed our movie off to them and walked away. Other than maybe, being involved a little bit in perhaps the creative or the marketing. That's just not the reality today. The reality today is you can still make and that's what we call an all rights deal. You can still make an all rights deal with a distributor, and that covers, let's say, an all rights domestic deal, meaning you're handling over the rights, licensing the rights to all the markets in the United States to one company. But if there's no advance or a small advance for those rights, it generally doesn't make sense to make that kind of a deal. And then some producers still do that. They'll still make those deals, but then they get screwed, and then they bitch and complain that they're not making money on their films, when if they understood that without a hefty advance or a significant advance, it makes sense to split up your rights as necessary or as needed to maximize the revenues you can make from each of the major markets. Mm-hmm. It's not that hard to do. We, meaning the community, the Hollywood or the filmmaking community, has been doing this since the 90s. It hasn't been something that everybody does, but it's been something that various producers have done. I've done it myself, still do it. And it allows us to keep more control of our rights for shorter terms, and allows us to maximize revenues. Again, that's something you're going to probably hear me say a lot in this podcast, is maximizing revenues.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that all distributors are crooked, But there are a number of crooked distributors out there. There's a sizable number of them. And when you make an all rights deal, you hand your film off to Company X and say, okay, go for it. Have fun in the U.S. and Canada. I'm counting on you, baby. And then they, maybe give you a $30,000 advance or $40,000 advance or something like that, or no advance. You're hoping that money's going to come back to you. And with the crooked companies, it won't, because they'll use devices, technical language in contracts, like cross-collateralization, where, without boring your listeners, Josh, cross-collateralization simply is you can take losses from one aspect of the business and apply them to the profits of another part of the business to reach zero or a negative number, and then the producer doesn't see any money. So you never want to see the words cross-collateralization in a contract, and you also then have to really have the contract looked at carefully so that other words that could mimic that phrase aren't in the contract when making all rights deals.
Yeah. You've already hit on so many of these topics that I wanted to talk about in this podcast. Like you hinted at them. So I'm really excited because a lot of the things you said, we're going to go into a little bit greater detail here, because I've got in front of me, I've got the article that you wrote for The Wrap not too long ago, entitled "The Road to Distributing Your Film is Not as Hard as You Think." And in it, you kind of give this great broad overview of sort of the state of the industry and in distributing in this market, and then sort of different tactics to take along the way, different things to look out for. And you already hit on two little things, but I first want to say, like, one of the things your article mentions, and I think is very important, is that a lot of people don't think about distributing until the very end, and it's kind of that dreaded moment. Do you find that really the case with so many producers?
Yeah, I still do. It's interesting. The cross section that comes across my path, or calls me, or emails me. I mean, some producers are very smart, and they'll reach out to me or somebody like me early on, maybe before production or in the middle of production. But the majority of filmmakers and producers come to me once their film is done, and they either are getting to me right before the festival circuit, if that's the road they're looking to take, or maybe they have a genre film and they don't want to do the festivals, but they found my article or they found me and they're like, okay, I need a little help here because I hear the horror stories. I hear the horror stories, Jerome. I don't want to fall prey to those, so tell me what I need to know or what do I need to do. I'm glad that they're coming to me no matter what, or educating themselves in some way. What happens, though, sometimes is usually once a filmmaker's been on the festival circuit for a period of time, they've heard so many things from other filmmakers on the circuit that are true that if they don't wake up with distribution offers, they'll just dump it online, to the internet VOD market, and that's it. And they won't make any money, or they'll make very little money, and think that's just a rigged game, so to speak. That it's just so hard and so impossible. And and I don't usually get a lot of those people coming across my path because they already think they understand that it's just a bad game or a difficult game, and they have no hope left.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't laugh, but I mean that's just whenever I'm at a film festival, I hear what other filmmakers say, and most of what they say is just crap. They don't know what they're talking about when it comes to distribution.
Okay, so you already hit upon this earlier, but you talked about what you call film distribution 1.0, and that's where you got a lot of all rights deals, or maybe sold up to two different markets or districts or whatever, and then you've got your film distribution 2.0, which is sort of the beginning stages of online distribution and that sort of thing.
Right.
But you've coined the phrase now film distribution 3.0. Explain that for us, because that's what we're in right now.
Exactly. I came up with that phrase recently. I think it's very applicable. It's not like I was trying to invent some awesome phrase or whatever, but I think it's very applicable to today, to also differentiate from where we've been.
Yeah.
Because distribution 1.0, what I refer to that is as you just said, the all rights deals from the 80s, the 90s, up until about up through the 90s, even into the double O's. The 2.0 is, 2007, 2008, 2009, where these early platforms were the talk of the town, the talk of America. I mean, there was a lot of buzz, and everybody and it was, the democratization of film distribution is here. Thank God, it's the savior of filmmakers, and everybody flocked to upload their films at these sites, but the public didn't follow with their wallets. Partly, for a lot of reasons. Which I talk about in the article. Lack of broadband penetration in the marketplace. That is, the majority of America didn't have broadband back then, which is not that long ago, but they do now. And the devices, the change in being able to view things on iPads. iPads hit the market, tablets hit the market in the spring of 2010. So now today, and most of those platforms still don't have traffic today, don't have sustainable traffic. Today we've got what I predicted would happen. What I would call the big boys. The big boys, the big players in the marketplace would become the monsters in the future, and they would control, or they would have possession of those sites where the majority of the traffic, the majority of the consumers would go. And indeed, that has happened. iTunes, Amazon, Hulu, Vudu. All these companies, for the most part, are major corporate entities now. Yeah. Or they're controlled by major corporate entities. Now, that's not a bad thing, mind you. Some people say, "Oh, that's just horrible." Well, not exactly. And it's not because there's several benefits. One, if you know that there's a limited number of sites where your film should be online when you get to that stage of exploiting the film, if it's only a dozen, well, you know what? That's easy to deal with. Relatively easy to deal with. You don't have to be on 300 digital platforms to make money. You get on a dozen, and you're fine. Or you can get on some of those dozen and then create your own platform as well. That is, what I mean by that is you can have an embeddable player like Distrify, something like that, on your website or on your Facebook page, and you can drive people to that place. So those are advantages today. To be on the big boy sites, that's where millions of people go every month, and that's where their eyeballs are, and that's where people search for stuff. So why not be on those sites? That's where the majority of the money is being made by independent producers today. Yeah. So, it's an advantage. And so Distribution 3.0 is really not only about recognizing the different landscape for online VOD, but recognizing that it's about maximizing revenues again, exploiting each of the markets, probably not making an all rights deal unless it's the correct deal to make, but splitting up your rights as needed, maximizing revenues, exploiting your film as needed in each of the markets in the way that it needs to be exploited in each of the markets. Because the major markets all have different ways that you would market and exploit. Cable, I want to be careful about not getting too into the weeds with your audience in a short podcast, but for instance, cable, satellite, and telephone company VOD, which is, in a lot of ways the same as internet VOD, but they're different platforms. Yeah. And how you would market your film on those platforms is different than marketing on the internet platforms. So there are differences in each of the markets how you're going to reach your audience. And Distribution 3.0 is about recognizing the differences and maximizing for all of it.
Okay. So in your explanation of Film Distribution 3.0, you've got sort of these three pillars that you recognize as the important aspects to understand to do it. So your first one is, like you mentioned a few times now, leveraging each of the major markets, and you've got those listed as the theatrical release, Blu-ray, DVD markets, video on demand, internet and television, and also foreign markets. So and you're saying there's others that fall outside of that you just wouldn't focus on because the percentages are so small.
Well, yeah, not exactly. There are other markets. I tend to focus on the main markets because that's where the bulk of the money comes. Mm-hmm. But there are other markets such as, say, the college, the university market. You could approach the organization that works with colleges, universities around the country, and book your independent film if it's the right film, hits the right audience into college towns and universities, or at the schools themselves around the country. I mean, that is a market that can generate good money on certain films, and if you can get a speaker's fee by going with the film, even better. There's the hotel, in the airplane market. Right. And the military bases. I mean, so we call that hotels and military bases, airplane. We kind of it's kind of considered one market. That's a market that should be exploited. For independent films, it's harder. If the film's got a name in it or a couple of names, great. No names, it's harder to crack these markets because you're sitting on an airplane. And what are they offering you? I mean, if you're on United Airlines, they've got a thing with DirecTV. So, you know what? You're going to probably very likely choose something that was in the theater that you missed, something you've heard about, because you just really want to escape from having to be in a plane for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Stuck there. So I mean, there are other markets that can be exploited. But I tend to focus on the main ones because those are the ones that have the potential to generate the most revenue.
Mm-hmm. And I see here that you say you typically recommend starting with a theatrical release and going after that market, but isn't that typically seen as a loss leader? Why would you recommend that?
It is. All right. Here's why a loss leader is still important today.
Okay.
And it's not important for absolutely every single film. It really depends upon. Frankly, it depends upon the elements of a film. What's the film's title? What's the film's genre? Is it an easy title to remember? Is it something catchy? Hate to make it sound as superficial as that, but that actually makes a difference in film.
Well, yeah, you want audiences to actually see your movie.
Yeah, you do. I saw a title of a film a few months ago, some independent film. It literally had a title you could not pronounce.
Wow.
There weren't vowels in the right places. I didn't know how to pronounce it. If you saw it somewhere, you go, this person doesn't know how to spell, and I don't even know what they're trying to say. Okay, arty, sure. Art house, But you know what? I bet no art house will ever program that film because you can't say to your friend, "Wow, I just saw this incredible movie. What's it called?" I can't tell you. Where does that go? What do you mean? Well, I can't spell it and I can't even pronounce it. It was a weird title. Oh, great. You've just really sold the film to your friend.
Yeah, really.
So a good title, doesn't have to be catchy, but a good title, the right elements, something that, can connect with an audience, whether that's horror, thriller, action, adventure, comedy, names in the cast obviously always help connect to your audience, and it's really so it's really important as to what is there to market to reach your audience. So now I forgot where I was going with that. Sorry.
I'm curious. Why is it still useful as a loss leader? I'm assuming this would be a limited release, maybe East Coast, West Coast, and
sure.
and Houston, that sort of stuff. And
yeah, all right, yeah. So right. So now I'm back on track here with your question specifically in terms of why would anybody, especially with an independent film, want to open theatrically if it's going to cost them money and they're not going to make it back? And there's several reasons. I mean, the biggest one is, A, what if you open it in the right theater in the right town and it just takes off? And people keep coming back and keep referring friends to it, and it becomes, something that's generating real money. You wouldn't know that unless you tried it or unless you had test screens ahead of time that told you, boy, people really like this film.
Yeah.
And a film, and I'm going to use an example of a film a number of years ago called What the Bleep Do We Know? kind of it's a new agey film. It was a cross, but probably one of the first films I think I ever noticed that was really a cross between narrative and documentary, and it blended it, I think, quite well. Now, this is a film that didn't get selected at any of the major festivals. They attempted to get in the top festivals, right, and they were rejected. The biggest star in the film was Marlee Matlin. So they decided they would open the movie by themselves in a theater in Oregon for a week and see what happened. And they would target and market their audience, the New Age people, the spiritually minded people, maybe even the religious people. I don't know if that was part of their core audience they marketed to, but New Age and spiritual minded, etc. So they targeted that town, and people came to see the movie. And it's actually a pretty darn good film. It's a pretty darn good movie. It's entertaining and it's educational, but it's entertaining as well. So it's not just documentaries. A lot of people don't like documentaries, but it went beyond that. The movie did so well that it was held over week after week after week. It ran for 19 weeks.
Wow.
They made real money by doing that. Not only that, because, and I don't know at what week it occurred, but at some point Hollywood noticed, because those box office numbers get reported by Nielsen, which is owned by Rentrack now. So Hollywood sees what movies are doing, every week across the country. And some of the studios in LA noticed this film. Well, this film keeps making money. What is this? What the bleak do we know? What is this? So, so they found out. They pitched the film, the producers. There were probably several offers on the table. I don't know how many offers were literally on the table, but the producers made a deal with Samuel Goldwyn, who then released the movie across the country. And the movie did something like, I don't know, I think 10, 11, $12 million in America. All because they said, what the hell? Let's just open it ourselves.
Yeah.
We can't get into Sundance. We can't get into Toronto. Let's just open it ourselves in the theater and see what happens.
But,
I mean, it's a remarkable story.
Sure. And statistically, that wouldn't happen.
and that is available to potentially any filmmaker with a good film.
Right.
Now, that's not necessarily the sole reason to open theatrically. But when you have a movie that opens theatrically, let's say New York and LA. Okay, if you run for a week in New York, good chance you're going to get reviewed by the New York Times, especially if you pitch them and you have a PR person who pitches them. You're going to, in the LA, you want to get reviewed by the LA Times. You're going to get reviewed by some major papers, some major outlets and websites. And that stuff is valuable in selling the film in all the aftermarkets.
Gotcha.
And even if you lose money because you spend money on marketing and advertising, and your box office numbers don't, recoup all you've spent, by being able to say the movie was a theatrically released film when you're pitching these other markets does make a difference.
Yeah.
Especially, one theater, two theater, a 1 week run here, a 1 week run there. It's going to make a difference. If you play in 10 cities or 15 cities for a week, that can make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of ties into your point where going directly to just an online market typically doesn't result in the sort of numbers that people are looking for.
Typically, yes, and there are outliers and there are exceptions, and there's a film that I don't want to name the name of the film because I'm probably going to give your audience some real numbers here, but and then I'll get in trouble if I name the film. But it's a film that didn't open in the U.S. theatrically.
What's the genre? Can you have the genre?
Yeah, I'll say I'm going to say drama.
Okay.
But it wasn't a straight drama. It had some other elements to it.
Right.
It had a drug element to it, and probably some comedy. But I don't want to.
Sure.
Sure. I don't want to get nailed for really identifying the film. So it did not open theatrically in the U.S., but it did in at least one other country outside America, maybe two countries. They ended up making a deal with a distributor where it was just going to go out on disc, Blu-ray, DVD, and VOD, day and date, meaning, more than one market at the same time.
Right.
Its first month on VOD made like $60,000 to $70,000.
Wow.
And that's really quite respectable for an independent film. That's very respectable for an independent film. Now, granted, that's its first month. It's not going to sustain that month after month after month. But if after 2 months they've made over 100,000, and this is the share to the producers. This is after those digital platforms got their cut.
Wow.
For an independent film that is essentially a drama, that's damn good.
Yeah.
So, it probably wouldn't have made sense for that particular film to really open theatrically beyond maybe New York, L.A., and a couple other cities, which they didn't even do anyways. So, you really have to, I tend to approach distribution from, I don't want to say a cookie cutter standpoint, but that all options are on the table.
Right.
And look at the options, and I can give people the general basis on which to then make a personal decision on their film. That is, theatrical almost always helps a film, but you have to weigh the loss leader aspect of how much would I spend and would I really get that back, which no one knows for sure until you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to kind of factor in how much your film costs to make and where you can benefit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Somebody making a $50,000 movie and they really don't have the money for P&A, that is for what we still call it P&A even if it's digital, but prints and advertising. Mm-hmm. So, i.e. a DCP and advertising. But anyways, if you don't have the money for P&A and you'd have to raise it on Kickstarter or somewhere, do you want to spend the time doing that? Would it be worth it to do that? If it's a $50,000 drama with no names, well, would being able to say a theatrical release help? Well, if you get a good review from a major paper, major outlet, yeah, it's going to help. Mm-hmm. Because a drama is a hard sell typically in the American market with no names in it.
Yeah. And
so you need all the help you can get.
Yeah. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I also wanted to go over, not too long, I wanted to go over your two other pillars that you mentioned, which is splitting up your rights between different companies, essentially, and also just sort of keeping abreast of what's actually going on in the market. So, but you mentioned splitting up your rights between different companies, meaning, Blu-ray and DVD rights to one company, maybe video on demand rights to another company. Why is that important?
Okay. The main reason is this. There's over 100 companies that still do and produce and manufacture and distribute Blu-ray and DVD. Mm-hmm. So that adage that people are hearing that DVD is dying or DVD is dead, I'm sorry, you guys. If you believe that, you're incorrect.
Yeah, the percentages say otherwise.
Is it decreasing a little bit every year? Yes. Are there some years where it drops a bit much? Yes. But actually, and I won't digress here too much, Blu-ray actually increased. The amount of money made from Blu-ray increased last year over the previous year. Very so cool. 2012 was a better year than 2011. 2013, we'll see in a few months what numbers end up being. But, it defies conventional thinking or conventional, thought, words that people speak. Because every article I read about DVD says, the reporter says it's dying. But these reporters are just that. They're reporters. They're, I'm sorry, they have small brains and small minds, and they don't do real investigative work in their journalism. No, I don't hate reporters. So, anyways, back to, I just digressed there, but back to your point of why is it good to split up the rights? Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's about 100 companies that still do DVD and Blu-ray. There's a number of aggregators out there that aggregate to the cable, satellite, and telephone company platforms as well as Internet. If you make a deal with a Blu-ray DVD company, and today now, over the past year and a half, they're asking for all rights. They didn't used to. They just wanted disc rights, but now they're asking for all rights. If you make a deal with them for all rights, all they're going to do is going to farm out the VOD to one of the other companies that you could have gone to directly yourself.
Sure. And it's not their priority.
Why make an all rights deal then in that situation if they're just going to take a percentage from the percentage you get from the aggregator, the VOD aggregator? Mm-hmm. An aggregator is basically it's a term we use for VOD online and on the cable satellite telco. Simply means it is essentially a distributor, but it's someone who aggregates the content.
Right.
And yeah, and they're a middleman, but we call them aggregators. That's just a term we've been using for the past 4 or 5 years. So it makes no sense to make an all rights deal in those situations. But if that DVD Blu-ray company says, look, we'll pay you $100,000 or we'll pay you $50,000 for all rights, and your film costs $20,000 to make, well, then you might make that deal. You know, you're going to have to weigh whether it's worth it to do that or not, because whatever advance you get is probably all the money you're going to see for the length of that contract.
Yeah, but see, I would imagine as a independent filmmaker myself that you're sort of in this position where they have the power because they have the money, or at least you feel that way, even though you're providing the product. So if they offer an all rights deal, you know, who are you to decline it? Maybe that's your chance, you know, at least that's how you feel.
You make a good point, but here's the thing, it's all in, this game of filmmaking, this game of distribution, the power rests wherever we believe the power rests.
Sure.
Now, I don't want to, sound platitudinal about this, but if I walk into, let's say, a hall of distributors, and I am desperate, and I am, I feel powerless, you know what I'm going to get taken advantage of? Mm-hmm. They're going to read it, and they're going to rape me, okay? Sorry to be graphic, but, I'm just being straight.
Fiscally, they will rape you fiscally.
Yeah, exactly. If I walk in to a hall or a room of distributors, and I know that my film is good, I've got reviews, I've got press coverage, I have audiences telling me the movie's good, maybe I've done some film festivals and everybody loves it, or I've won an award or some awards, and I walk in with a package in my hand that looks killer, and this is something I talk about in marketing. I've got good key artwork, that's your movie poster. It looks good. I've got a press kit that looks good, that matches the key art on my DVD. Everything looks good. I walk in and I say, and I have an attitude, not an arrogant attitude, but an attitude of, I've got a winner here.
Yeah.
I walk in and I have a winner, and I'm not desperate, and I don't care if I make a deal or not, because the power is being able to walk away and say no. I walk in that room, you know what's going to happen? People are going to respond to that on some level, and I'm less likely to get taken advantage of. Mm. And I probably will have at least several offers handed to me or given to me saying, we're interested in your film. It's a psychological, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this issue, but selling is psychology. Anything we buy in the marketplace today, whether it's tires or a widget or an iPhone or whatever, everything is it's all perceived value. In other words, nothing actually has any inherent value. It's all perceived value. It's set by a manufacturer. It's set by a marketplace. Mm-hmm. So when you walk in with a good movie that's a quote-unquote winner, what I'm saying is a winner, and you say, I'm not going to take a bad deal, then you know what? You're establishing a value for the film.
Yeah. Gotcha. Very cool. So we kind of talked about those two pillars, and we touched on that third one, which is essentially, if I can summarize, it's really like knowing the different markets and what's actually going to get you the most amount of revenue for your input, essentially.
Yes.
Okay. So I had sort of an abstract question, but you touched on it a little bit, and other interviewees that I've talked to have expounded on this quite at length, and I'm curious to hear your side of it, because you deal with distribution typically, but you also produce. So I had this question for you. A lot of the interviews I've talked to, and a lot of producers who are forward-thinking that I've talked to, they say that cultivating your audience from the very beginning through the inception of the film is one of the most important aspects in standing out in the independent film market. As in a way, you're sort of building your audience and your market and the people who will buy your film from you from the beginning. Do you see that happening, or do you recommend that, or what's your take on that?
Oh, absolutely. I totally recommend it. I'm a huge proponent of this because when you can build up a Facebook page of 50,000 fans or 100,000 fans before your movie is done,
yeah,
or even if your movie is done, you now have leverage because you've aggregated an audience that's interested enough in your film that they clicked like. Now, to reach them is not, to reach all of them, usually it's going to cost some money today because Facebook changed things almost 2 years ago, where when you post something, it's not fed to your entire base of followers. But when you have, let's say, 100,000 fans, then you know what? Anytime you post, an average of 10,000 people will see that, and it won't have cost you anything.
Yeah.
So, about 10%, 5 to 15% is what, when you post, is what your audience or your friends will see. And of your total numbers, that's about what will be seen.
Right, and they've changed it a little bit, where if people really like the post and engage, they seed it now to more of your followers.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. So, so you get rewarded when you post something good that has some kind of viral effect to it. You can also, now here's the other, so having an audience is important because you can monetize that audience, a percentage of that audience, to buy your film or to watch a VOD viewing of it. You can also, with a distributor, say, look, we have 100,000 fans on Facebook. We have an email list of 25,000 fans.
Yeah.
We will be able to market the film, and if we don't have the right offer from you, we're just going to do it ourselves, because we know that we can monetize and make money from a percentage of people buying our film from our email list and from our Facebook page. So it gives you some leverage with distributors. And it also shows the distributors that you have an audience for your film, a ready-made audience.
Awesome.
So it is important. The problem for filmmakers is, and I encounter this every time I bring it up in any place that I'm speaking at, how many people, just for the heck of it, how many people, raise your hand, who hate Facebook? Half the room goes up.
Yeah.
Among creatives, among filmmakers,
yes.
Half of them hate Facebook. And I don't know that they hate it inherently, but they hate that they now have one more thing that they have to deal with and spend time on to help make their movie a success. So it's like, so I get it. We have more responsibility today as independent producers, more things we have to deal with and do to actually monetize our work. And a lot of people don't like that. I mean, it's not like it was 15 years ago. But the one thing I'll say about Facebook is it's the one place that you can actually aggregate an interested audience more easily than anywhere else. I mean, Twitter as well. But Facebook, you are able to hyper-target.
That's true.
And no other place on this world has the ease with which to do that as Facebook does. It's important and it's necessary for producers to surrender and jump in, or hire someone, or budget and hire someone who can do it for you, because there are some good people out there who you can hire, not spend a fortune on, and have them help build your audience.
And I would imagine, at least for me, coming from a marketing perspective, one of the important aspects of that Facebook group is sort of as a sort of lead generation, and then you can convert them to the mailing list and eventually get them either to share the film and engage with it or purchase it. That's getting them to that mailing list for me would be one of the more important goals along the process.
Absolutely, and I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. In fact, it sounds like you're probably someone that producers should be hiring to help with that, because that's exactly. So briefly earlier this year, I decided I wanted to grow. I had a little extra money from my marketing that I spend on my program and whatnot, and I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grow the likes on my Facebook page. But at the same time, I want to convert as much as possible to my mailing list, because once I have their email, that will be good for a long time.
Yeah.
Now, some people change their email periodically, sure. But by and large, a lot of people don't. A majority of people don't change their email every year or every 2 years. So I was able to grow my mailing list by about 3,000 names and email addresses in literally about 4.5 weeks.
Wow.
And my spend on that, the money I spent marketing, was not that high. It might have been $20, $25 a day.
What was your sign-up benefit?
Yes, exactly. What was I giving away to get them? I was giving away, I still am actually on my Facebook page, a free report. It's a 5 or 6 page report. I should know that. I just forget. It's 5 or 6 pages, but it's the 6 I call it 6 Secret Lies to Film Distribution. And it's a great little primer for someone who may not know a lot about distribution, or someone who knows stuff about distribution, but what are the predominant lies out there, the myths out there, and what's the truth about them.
Mm-hmm. So
I give that away for free when they sign up. It's on auto response, so it's immediately sent to them. And one would think that, hey, people sign up, they're going to get the report, and then they'll unsubscribe, right? They'll just get the report because they want it, and then they'll unsubscribe. I literally probably have only gotten, out of those 3,000 at that time that signed up, I got maybe 5 people unsubscribed.
Yeah, because they see that
after getting the
value.
report.
They see that value, and they want to keep coming back. They're waiting for, what's he going to do next?
Yeah, and in fact, in that auto-respond, I give them more than just that report.
Awesome.
So I'm over-delivering, and then they go, wow, this report was, even if they go, oh, this report was okay. I think most would probably say, hey, it's good. But even if some said, hey, it's okay, but then there's other things in there that are really good for any producer. So they're like, oh my God, this is great stuff. Well, I'll stick around for a little while.
Yeah, and this is my thought, where you have, to put it bluntly, you have your angle, right? It's distribution, and you're speaking to that audience who wants to learn about distribution. But when in my mind, when you have a film, you have your film audience, and what necessarily is their interest or draw? Do you tell them behind the scenes stuff?
Great question, and I would love to hear your take on it. So I'll tell you my take, and then I want to hear yours, if you don't mind.
Well, I'll have to struggle to think of one.
Oh, well, no, okay, so here's what I consult. When somebody wants some Facebook help, and it's a movie or a documentary, this is what I explain. So this is your audience should really thank you, because they're getting a lot of some
yes,
good.
That's what I'm looking for.
It's not just enough for most films just to constantly be promoting their film.
Yep.
Hey, look at the new image look at the still photo from behind the scenes. Oh, hey, check out this behind the scenes footage. It's only here, nowhere else. Or hey, give us your email address and we'll give you a free, snippet of our secret interview we did with our star Nicole, Kidman, or whatever,
Yeah. Or some other no name.
Yeah, there's a limit to how much people are going to click like for that, or give you your email address. What I advise people to do is think a little bit outside the box when it comes to your film page. So let's say, let's say the film is about, I'll use yoga as an example. Let's say it's a documentary about yoga. Okay, then I would say to the client, the producer, what can you do to make this more than just a page about your film, but that speaks to the interest of those who might like a documentary about yoga? What can you offer? What kind of posts can you do weekly? 2, 3, 4 posts weekly. What can you do that is not just about your film? Well, they could aggregate content from other places. They could once a week find a great article from one of the yoga magazines online and post that article, on their Facebook page. Hey, just came across this. This is about how to blah, blah, blah. Expand beyond just the film itself, but obviously has to stay in the realm of what the film deals with. Mm-hmm. And that's a great way to I mean, it's essentially, to some extent, what I do with my film distribution page at Facebook. It's like, I want to provide value. So how do I get people to like the page and stay? I can't just be selling my services and my program all the time. People don't care. I mean, some people will care. But I'm always providing good articles, things that I find of value that I think producers should know. I mean, here's my motive. I want to only post things that producers should know. So I'm not going to post every day, because everything that happens in the distribution sphere is not something necessarily that a creative has to know every day. But I pick out the important things, or the good things, the spicy things.
Yeah.
And that's what I would tell someone to do with their film or their documentary.
Right.
Okay, great. What else can you post about yoga? Maybe you have someone who writes for some of these magazines, and you make some deal with them to, do a short blog once a week, and that's another post for you. So you want to add value and give people a reason to read your posts.
Gotcha. Very cool. And my thought on that would be something that I've heard other people talk about, and I completely agree with, and something that I've been trying to do with my own brand is not necessarily center your Facebook page or your marketing around a single entity necessarily, but rather build up a full community based on your brand, sort of what you stand for, and that way you can then, I guess the word I'm looking for is your lifetime value of that fan or customer is increased because they're bought into the brand and not just a single product. So you can bring in fans to your company page, I could say, and then bring each film to them through that platform. That's my thought, at least.
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think. I think the key is really is expanding their reach as much as possible. I mean, there'll be some films that there's just a viral nature to what the subject matter of the film, and it'll just, if they just spend a little money on posts or on likes, they're going to grow their page regularly. But a lot of films don't fall into that arena. So, and the thing with Facebook posts is you can schedule them. I know you know this. You can schedule your Facebook posts. So on Sunday night, if you wanted to, you could schedule one for Monday morning. You can schedule the next one for Wednesday, and the next one for Friday, or you can do one for every day. And you can set that all up in an hour or a couple hours on any particular day on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And then it's all done for the week. Then all you got to do is stay connected, respond to any comments, and answer many messages that may come into your site. It doesn't have to be extremely labor intensive.
Yeah. Very cool. Jerome, thank you so much for giving us all this information and just your expertise in sharing it with us. What I want to do now is just kind of begin to wrap up a little bit. So I've got a question for you, and this may be sort of a tough one, but I'm curious to see if you have an answer for this, and feel free to take your time.
Okay.
What is one question about distributing that people keep missing and you wish they would ask you?
Producer reps is a great example. I do get asked periodically about producer reps. Maybe not enough. Too many filmmakers, too many producers think that's the way to go, because they got a phone call or they got an email from a producer rep who got the catalog of a film festival that they had film in, and then they get pitched by the producer rep. Just today, I had a guy call me, a client, saying, "Jerome, I know how you feel about producer reps," which means he knows I don't care for most of them. And he said, "So what do you think about?" And he named the name, which I can't say here. And I said, "Do not hire that person. They charge $15,000, and they're not going to do anything for you, or they'll do very little for you. And a lot of producers have had to sue that producer rep to get their rights back because nothing happened, other than writing a check for $15,000 that they're now out of." And he said, "Oh, well, I was quoted $14,500. I said, "Oh, well, such a deal."
Yeah.
$500 less than their normal rate. Still, there's only one scenario to use a producer rep, and I talk about that at my website, which, again, is distribution.la. There's a good article, 2 articles about sales agents and producer reps. So, if anything, maybe that question doesn't get asked of me enough.
Gotcha. Very cool. So now I just want to again just be able to wrap it up here. So, do you have a favorite film? Like, if you're on a desert island, what would that be? What would be the one film you had to watch over and over?
I'm going to name a handful of films. I'm not going to just name one.
Okay.
12 Monkeys, Chinatown,
Yeah.
L.A. Confidential, Godfather, Apocalypse Now. Those are probably, those are definitely in my top 10.
Mm-hmm.
I think, so 12 Monkeys is probably, is maybe number 1 or number 2. I think it's a brilliant film. I actually am not, I think that some of Terry Gilliam's films, I know a lot of people think he's a genius, and I don't dispute that. But a lot of his films I don't think are great. They have great things in them, and there's really cool stuff about them, and he's very inventive. But story-wise, I think a number of his films don't exactly work entirely as a full, as a full story. That there's some flaws here and there in the story. 12 Monkeys is flawless.
I'm gonna have to check it out.
Have you ever seen it?
I have not seen it, so I'm definitely gonna check it out.
Yeah. It's definitely a film that you've got to stay engaged. You're not going to sit back and have a bunch of beers and hope to follow it. You kind of probably need to be sober to follow it.
Yeah.
Because it's going to take some brain power to kind of stick with where it goes and all of that. In fact, Roger Ebert, when he was alive, when the movie came out, said after watching it once, he still wasn't sure what it was about. I don't think it's that complicated, but it involves time travel,
Mm-hmm.
and so you have to kind of be able to track stuff.
Oh, I'm definitely gonna see it now. Yeah. Very cool.
There you go. I don't think in the past, I'll have to say over the past 10 years, I don't know if anything has really blown me away.
Right.
I mean, I've rated, I'll rate movies as some 8s, maybe some 9s at IMDb or whatever, but I don't know that I've really come across something that just has blown me out of my seat in the past decade.
Do you have a movie or possibly a TV show or maybe even a YouTube channel that we should keep an eye out for that you think is going to be really cool?
Yeah, not necessarily. Although, each year I try to catch some of the new shows on TV, on broadcast and cable. And I even hesitate to promote this because I've only seen one episode, the series premiere this week. But that TV show, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I think that's one of the best shows I've seen in a long time, based on just the pilot.
Right.
Hopefully all the shows will be good, but it was extremely funny and smartly written. I mean, I was really impressed with the writing of the show. So that's the Andy Samberg show.
Very cool. And one last question before we go. What is the best piece of advice that you would give to filmmakers?
All right. Well, the best piece of advice I would give to filmmakers about distribution is come to my class or get my 3-day program. It's my 3-day distribution program. And at the very least, check out my Facebook page, and I'll give you the address. And I know this sounds self-serving, but if filmmakers want to have a career as a producer or as a director, they want a sustainable career, they've got to learn this stuff. And it doesn't have to be drudgery. You can learn pretty much what you need to know in just a matter of a few days, a couple of days, few days.
Very cool. And what is that website and Facebook or even Twitter? What have you got for us?
The Facebook address is simply facebook.com/film distribution.
Very
Real
cool.
simple.
And that's where you like people to go.
Yeah, and if they forget that, they go to my website, which is distribution.la, and on the left-hand side, I'm going to be designing my website, but currently on the left-hand side is a link to the Facebook page.
Awesome. Jerome, thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise with us. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And good luck to everybody who is listening to this, and go out there and make movies and be successful.
Support for this podcast episode is brought to you by Indie Film Finance Guide. Learn more at producerspal.com/finance guide. To learn more about this episode and Jerome, please go to producerspal.com/Jerome Courshon.